Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to learn about Joyce McKinney and the Manacled Mormon from a couple of articles online and from Joyce herself. Let's go to Medium first, where it says, "When I lived in England during the 1970s, I used to love reading the two main tabloid newspapers, The Sun and The Mirror. Both of them were written for people with about a third grade vocabulary, and both were hilarious. The Sun tended conservative and The Mirror tended labor. I fondly remember one story that went on for months, headlined Joyce McKinney and the Manacled Mormon. There's even a movie about the story called Tabloid. It's well worth a look. I can't tell the story any better than Anthony Delano, chief U.S. correspondent of the Daily Mirror. Here is what he had to say. I've done a couple of internet searches for Joyce McKinney, and there's virtually nothing there at all. It's almost like she never existed, and yet, for a few months back in the days of Jim Callahan and Johnny Rotten, she was one of the biggest tabloid stories we'd ever seen. If you were around at that time, then the words Joyce McKinney and the Manacled Mormon should send you hurtling back to your youth. But in case you weren't, or in case you've forgotten the details, let me remind you of the salient points of the story. Miss McKinney was a brilliant, intelligent, erstwhile Miss Wyoming who came out of the Appalachians to join the Church of the Latter-day Saints, better known as the Mormons, and who, after failing to get off with Wayne Osmond, began a relationship with a certain Kirk Anderson. When he decided he'd had enough, she became seriously infatuated, following him around the country and harassing him to such an extent that eventually he requested a posting overseas, which is how he came to be in London in 1977. But her determination to find him was greater than his ability to escape. She hired a private detective, tracked him down, and came to Britain. With her was a friend, Keith May, whose position was always ambiguous, or at least unenviable. He seems to have been besotted with Miss McKinney, but to have accepted that he stood no chance of getting anywhere because of her own obsession with Anderson. McKinney and May then proceeded to kidnap Anderson, threatening him with replica guns, bundling him into a car and taking him to a rented cottage, where he was held captive for 3 days. Whilst there, well, look, this is how the London Evening News of 23 November 1977 reported the committal proceedings at Epsom Magistrates Court. A young Mormon missionary told Today how an ex-beauty queen kidnapped him and then made love to him while he was chained to a bed in a lonely cottage. Kirk Anderson, 21, said the girl, Joy McKinney, and her friend, Keith May, tied down his arms and legs with leather straps, padlocks, chains, and rope so that he was spread-eagled. May then left the room while Miss McKinney tore off his blue silk pajamas. She grabbed my pajamas from just around my neck and tore them from my body. The chains were tight and I could not move. I did not want it to happen. I was very upset. That's the essence of the story, and you can probably understand the media meltdown that resulted. You've got most of what you need for a decent tabloid sensation right here. An attractive young woman, a serious young man, and a religious group that might as well have been a cult for all the British hacks knew of the Mormons. But more than that, Miss McKinney herself was sensational. It wasn't just that photographic evidence of her modeling career began to become available, but more that when she finally got into the witness box during a bail hearing, she revealed herself to be a star. She spoke in a southern drawl that was fabulously exotic in itself, and she had no apparent inhibition. Absolutely no sense of reticence at all. 25 years later, and social standards have changed in Britain, but in 1977, people simply didn't stand up in court, particularly at a bail hearing in a magistrate's court, when there was no need to say anything and explore the intimate details of their and their partners' sex lives. In her most famous phrase, she declared, "I loved Kirk so much that I would have skied down Mount Everest in the nude with a carnation up my nose." The papers lapped it up, so apparently did the magistrates, who released her on bail and then presumably went home for a quiet lie-down. We could hardly wait for the real thing, the actual trial, when Miss McKinney would be charged with kidnapping. The charge of rape could not then be brought when the victim was a man, and anyway, there wasn't anyone in the country who gave a toss about the alleged victim of the alleged crime. The prevailing opinion then, as it would probably be now, was that he must have enjoyed it. Curious double standards we sometimes display, no? And then Joyce McKinney did a runner. The trial was due to start in May 1978, but she wasn't there. She jumped bail, fled the country, and arrived in America via Ireland and Canada, at which which stage the tabloids really went wild. Without the sub judice restrictions, they were able to print all the salacious details they'd acquired of her career in softcore porn and every last piece of tittle-tattle that had accumulated around this extraordinary woman. The Daily Mirror led the pack, having built up a far more substantial dossier than their rivals. At a time when the Sun was beginning to take over as the most popular paper in the country, the Mirror had a fabulous story with which to fight back. It went to town and back again, even producing this book as an enduring tribute to their coverage. And it's a fantastic read. Really top-quality tabloid sensationalism with the story padded out to fill up a paperback and 16 pages of photos. You don't often see it around, but take my advice. If you do come across it, leap on it and lap it up. The book is called Joyce McKinney and the Case of the Manacled Mormon by Anthony Delano. After that, Joyce disappeared for a while, but she appeared again according to an article in allthatisinteresting.com that says, although arrested and briefly held in jail on kidnapping and assault charges along with Keith May, Joyce McKinney was never charged with the rape of Kirk Anderson. In any event, she jumped bail and returned to the United States. British authorities never sought her extradition, and with that, the Manacled Mormon case came to an inconclusive end. But in 1984, the case popped up again after Joyce McKinney was arrested after being found near Anderson's workplace in Salt Lake City, allegedly with rope and handcuffs in her car. McKinney claims she simply happened to be passing through the airport where he was working. McKinney briefly reappeared in headlines again in 2008 after becoming the owner of the world's first cloned puppies. A laboratory in Seoul, South Korea had cloned McKinney's beloved pet Booger for her. Amid the ensuing publicity, a newspaper identified her as the woman from the Kirk Anderson case decades earlier. When asked if she was the same Joyce McKinney of Manacled Mormon fame, she supposedly snapped, "Are you going to ask me about my dogs or not? Because that's all I'm prepared to talk to you about." And now let's finish up by watching a few of Joyce's own words about the situation.
Questions, anyone? Oh, we've all been through that, haven't we, girlfriend? But the thing I always resented so much is when these reporters would use the word obsession. I wasn't any different than any woman in this auditorium. I was looking for that magical guy, don't we all, ladies? That handsome prince. The one that makes our heart beat faster. That's what I was looking for. And I had a very dangerous cult taken away from me. And that's one of the things that concerned me about this film. I don't think there was enough stress on that. The Mormon cult has destroyed the lives of thousands of people and caused suicides. What they do to minority groups, blacks, gays, women, is terrible. And someday I hope to tell the true story of what the Mormons did to me and to the man I loved. And that's my goal before I die, before I kick the bucket and go to heaven. I want to at least make sure that the story is told about that, because I think that's what's left out of this film. It's one of the things that bothers me about it.
And that's your fun Mormon story for today, folks. I absolutely hope you have the day that you deserve.